Great. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining tonight and welcome to Sappy Hour. My name is Jenna Quinn. I'm the Conservation Science Manager with Ontario Nature, and I'm really pleased to be the moderator for tonight's Sappy Hour. I'm calling in this evening from my home in Kitchener, which is on the Haldimand Tract, which is the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. I'm grateful to the Indigenous people then and now who tread on this land with care and responsibility. And I think it's important to remember that Atlas 3 is a province wide initiative. So no matter where you're joining from, we're all treaty people with a responsibility to be active in reconciliation. Please feel free to share in the chat where you're joining from today. And if you don't know the territory on which you reside, then I invite you to start learning the history of the land you're on and whose land is a great resource to help you get started. And we just popped the link for the chat into the chat there for that. As birders, we have a really strong connection to the land. We see the changes that happen over a day or a season, but we also see the changes that happen over our lives. And some of those are not always good changes. I think that our strong connection to the natural world is even more reason to recognize and reflect upon whose land we're on and how we treat all our non-human relations. Tonight's Sappy Hour is on the theme of celebrating and summarizing year 4. And if you've never been to a Sappy Hour before, then welcome. We're really happy to have you here. Sappy Hour is a play on the term happy hour, and it incorporates our Atlas mascot, the sapsucker. It's an opportunity to relax and unwind and learn more about the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas. You can check out the recordings of all the past Sappy Hours on the Atlas YouTube channel. And similarly, tonight's presentation will also be recorded and posted to the YouTube channel. Sappy Hour is also a great opportunity to tap into the Atlas 3 team and ask any questions you might have. If you have questions tonight for our presenters, please put them either in the Q&A section if you're watching on Zoom, or if you're on Facebook Live, you can also pop your questions into the comments box. I have the pleasure now of introducing our 2 speakers for this evening, and I really think they don't need an introduction here at this point as we enter our final year of the Atlas. So I'll turn it over to Mike Burrell and Kaylin Bumelis to take it away tonight. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Jenna. Jenna and I are both sick, so we're doing our best here. I really appreciate you being here tonight, Jenna, despite not feeling your best. So as Jenna said, we're presenting today our summarizing and celebrating year 4. It's crazy to me that we're going into our final year of the Atlas. Super exciting, obviously a little nerve-wracking and a little sad too, but here we'll reflect on last year's data collection and survey season. So for those who might be new or for those who need a refresher, we divide the province up into 47 regions. Ontario is very big. I especially learned that once I started working on this project. And so we divide it up into 47 regions that are coordinated by regional coordinators. Each of those regions are then divided up even further into 10 by 10 kilometer squares, which you can kind of see on the left in those maps. Yep, thanks, Mike. And so in each of those squares, our coverage goals are to get 20 hours of general atlasing and 25 point counts. And so in the right map, you can see in the darkest screen, we want every single 10 by 10 kilometer square to have those 20 hours and 25 point counts. In that medium green, the middle roaded north, we want 5% of squares. And then in the roadless north, we want 2% of squares to get the 20 hours and 25 point counts. We also have optional surveys for bird species that are hard to survey for on our general atlasing and point counts, and those are owls, nightjars, and marsh bird surveys. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so how are we doing so far? We just finished year 4 of 5. How are we comparing to Atlas 2, which was 20 years ago? So this time in the last Atlas, we had pretty well the same number of people participating. It was around 100 more during Atlas 2. But even with fewer Atlasers, we're still getting a really kind of on par number of species and especially larger number of records, larger number of point counts, and larger number of hours. We do have fewer squares, but that number will likely go up as we start to incorporate some of our ARU data and some of the other data that's not quite incorporated into the atlas yet. So we have a lot more records this atlas. You might notice we have nearly 2 million records as compared to Atlas 2, and we only had about 500,000 records at this point in the atlas. And that's because we've switched to that checklist approach, which is kind of similar to eBird, where every time you go out atlasing, you start a new checklist. So that has contributed significantly to the number of records. Point counts were just introduced in Atlas 2, so that's why we have likely more point counts in Atlas 3 so far. And then the number of hours are also higher in Atlas 3 than Atlas 2. The number in brackets is the number of peak hours, and then the number outside of the brackets is the total number of hours in Atlas 3 so far. So this is how people are submitting their data. You can see that yellow piece of the pie is increasing in size as time goes on, and that is the Nature Counts app. I personally love the Nature Counts app. It just was kind of launched in 2021, and we had some people who, were subscribing to the app, but we also had equal proportions of people using the Nature Counts web portal and eBird. And as time goes on, people just use the app more and more. And that's because the app has gotten better and better every single year. It has a lot of really cool features, including breeding evidence warnings. So, if a breeding evidence code is not suitable for a particular species, it'll give you a warning not to use that code and why. The app also has the safe dates incorporated right in there. It has a warning for if you're going to leave the square. I cannot say enough great things about the Nature Counts app. So if you're not trying it yet, if you're part of that 36%, if my math is right, not yet using the app, then I would say give it a go and see if you like it, because I think if you try it, you're really going to appreciate how easy it is to use. All right, special surveys. I alluded to these a little bit earlier. These are optional special surveys, but they do help us get at species that aren't typically surveyed well on point counts or on general atlasing. And so the first one is screech owl surveys. You could see that people might not have necessarily input their data just yet for the 2024 season. All of the numbers for 2021 to 2023 were lower when we originally were doing, summarizing, celebrating year 1, 2, and 3. And now that we're doing summarizing and celebrating year 4, those numbers for previous years are starting to go up. And I think it's just because, people are inputting their data still. A lot of these are done on paper forms, and so people are just getting to that backlog. So I think that number for 2024 for screech owls is going to go up as time goes on. Nightjars, I think it's the same sort of thing. I think people are still inputting their data. We're seeing an increase in the number of special surveys that people are taking up, generally speaking, as time goes on. So marsh birds is one of those where we started with just 32 marsh bird surveys that were done in 2021. And then, obviously people started to get the hang of it, and 2022 and 2023 really started submitting some of those marsh bird data forms. And I think we still have more to come for 2024. So stay tuned when we do this presentation next year. I'm telling you that 2024 number is probably going to go up. All right, peak hours. So this is a look at Southern Ontario up to our 100% line. So in every single one of these squares, we want 20 hours of survey effort. And so you could see a lot of those squares are red, which is noting the 20 hours, which is really, really great. And as the color gets lighter, so orange is a little bit less hours, and then yellow is less than 10 hours. So as we get closer to the northern part of that Southern Ontario line, as confusing as that is to say, thanks, Mike, we see less and less hours, and that's just because there's fewer people as you get further from kind of like the GTA or from Ottawa or from those big city centers. And also, some of the squares are just harder to access. Some of them might be ATVN only, or might be boat access or canoe access. So if you're someone who has those types of modes of transportation and wants to do some atlasing, definitely take a look at the coverage map or talk to some regional coordinators, and let's get some effort into some of those squares. And so this, I know the last slide is sometimes a little bit hard to wrap your head around because every single square is a different color. And so this is just kind of the average within the region, just to get a sense of how the region is doing overall. So this is the percentage of squares within the region that have more than 12 peak hours. I will say that some of those regions that are close to the Great Lakes, it may be misleading. So I'm thinking of like Region 1, or even so like the Essex region, sorry, Bruce Grey and Manitoulin. Some of those averaging might be a little bit misleading just because there's a lot of squares that are over top of water and are likely to not get 12 or more peak hours. But otherwise, this chart just kind of gives you a general sense of how those regions are faring. Again, as you get more north, it's sometimes harder to get into those squares and sometimes harder to get people into those places because there's not as many people. All right, so this is the roaded and roadless north. And so, as I mentioned earlier, in these areas, we want either 5% of squares or 2% of squares to have our survey coverage, so 20 hours and 25 point counts. And so, what that means is that it's either 5 squares per block. So, these blocks are 100 by 100 kilometer blocks. So, either 5 squares per block or 2 squares per block as you get to the roadless north. And so in the road north, it looks like we're doing pretty well. We have quite a few blocks where we have we're in that orange zone of 3 to 5% of squares that have greater than 12 peak hours. So they're on track to complete their survey coverage. This is the same sort of thing in Southern Ontario, but this is for point counts. So in this scenario, we would want every single square to have 25 or more point counts. And it looks like a lot of the regions are doing really, really well in this. Point counts, it's really fun to get out for a morning of point counts, as Mike Burrell can attest to. He's done a lot of those mornings. And so if we go to the next slide, we'll kind of see again the averaging, how a lot of those regions are doing on average with their point counts. The darkest blue shows that 75 to 100% of the squares have more than 15 point counts. That medium blue is 50 to 75%, but again, keep in mind, Manitoulin, Bruce Grey, Essex, those sorts of places have a lot of squares that are over top of water, so are likely to not get 15 or more point counts. And then as you move further north, it's a little bit harder to access. And again, this is the north, the same sort of thing as shown in the previous one. So we want 5% of blocks with 25 or more point counts, and then 2% of blocks with 25 or more point counts. So you could see the road in north is doing pretty well in this, and we've still got a few more northern trips to go this upcoming year.
All right, I'm going to give Kaylin a break here. Let her voice rest a bit. So we've got a lot of help with new technology in this atlas that a lot of you have heard about. One of those things that we've been doing this atlas is this idea of digital point counts. So in the photo here, you can see an atlaser with a Zoom handheld recorder. This one's set up on a tripod. And these are used to collect digital point counts. So this is a great way to help out with those point counts, even if you're not somebody who feels confident in being able to identify all the birds you can hear. You can use one of these digital devices to record the 5-minute point count, and then they get interpreted over the winter by experts that are hired by the Atlas. So you can see a pretty incredible increase from year over year over year as atlasers have figured out how amazing these tools are as a way to get coverage across the province. So we had almost 4,000 digital point counts collected this past year alone, which is absolutely bonkers. So great way that we've been able to increase our coverage and increase the number of people who have been able to help with those point counts. Another really amazing new tool that's available to us in Atlas 3 that wasn't available just 20 years ago are these autonomous recording units, or ARUs. So these are, again, recording devices, but these are programmable. So what's real cool about these is they can be set up, strapped to a tree or something else that they can be attached to, and they can be set up months ahead of time and then programmed to turn on during during the morning once the breeding season begins. So there's been an incredible effort, thanks to some of the government partners, especially that are involved in the Atlas. So Canadian Wildlife Service and Ministry of Natural Resources being the two big ones that have helped out with the ARU deployments across Northern Ontario. A lot of these spots that you see dots were deployed well beyond the road network, and as such are set out in like the early spring by helicopter and then retrieved kind of at the end of the season. So we've got on here, we have some blue ones. Those are places where either we have ARUs currently deployed and we just need to pick them up, or else in the case of the ones in the far northwestern part of the map, those are ones that we are hopeful to get deployed next year to boost our coverage. So absolutely amazing stuff to increase our coverage in the furthest, most north parts of the province and most remote parts of the province. And they're really helping us better understand what's happening with our birds and where birds are found across the province. This map here is for boreal owl, and it shows every one of those dots that's on this map is a place where boreal owl has been detected in the Atlas data set. What's really incredible is those blue dots are all from our ARU deployments. And then the pink ones are from regular old Atlas checklists, so collected by a human being. And one of the things that is really nice about these ARUs, not just that they can be deployed in remote places, but unlike Atlasers, they don't tend to get tired and want to sleep at night. So they're really great for increasing coverage for our nocturnal effort for things like owls, like boreal owl. So absolutely cool stuff. We've found all sorts of amazing things thanks to the help of our amazing Atlaser team. We talk about significant species a lot. These are species that we ask for extra details for because there's something special about them, whether it's they're species at risk or we're concerned about their populations, that they may become species at risk, or perhaps they're colonial species or just species we want to gather extra details on. So over the course of the Atlas, we've collected 150,000 records with breeding evidence of these provincially rare or species of interest. And of those, 35,000 or so were collected just last year alone. We're also, we've been asking Atlasers to pin exact locations of significant species, but other species as well. And we've collected over 50,000 pins, and 16,000 of those alone in 2024. And even more amazing, 80,000 of our records are from 42 different species at risk, and about 20,000 of those of 39 species were collected just in last year alone. So pretty incredible stuff when we're talking about how the Atlas is going to be able to directly help with some of these rare species, whether it's just doing better conservation planning or knowing what places need protection. I've got a few photos up here that were taken this past year, 2024, of some of the cool finds. On the left there is a Say's Phoebe that was on territory up on the Hudson Bay lowlands, which, as far as I'm aware, is the first record of a breeding season, record of this species that's displaying any kind of breeding evidence. So pretty cool stuff. The middle photo is of a Kirtland's warbler, and we had a couple breeding records of Kirtland's warbler this past summer in some remote areas. So also super cool, very, very rare breeding species here in Ontario, endangered. And then the bird on the right is a cerulean warbler. Maybe not quite as rare as those other two, but a very important species at risk here in Ontario. We have a sizable portion of the global population here. So some real cool stuff documented by Atlasers this past year. But we also are interested in the common species, and we've got some amazing numbers of records for our common species. So these are our top 10 species reported for the number of squares reported. The American robin is just squeaking by red-eyed vireo for top spot there. over 3,000 atlas squares have reported American robin. I think it's cool as we've done this presentation year after year after year. We've slowly seen some of the northern Ontario birds start creeping into the top 10 list. So things like white-throated sparrow and the forest birds like red-eyed vireo and northern flicker, starting to displace things like black-capped chickadee. So kind of cool to see as our survey coverage has improved across more central and northern Ontario, getting to see our species list change. All right, and of course we've got lots of amazing contributors. Tyler Hoare has contributed just shy of 60,000 records. He knew we were doing this presentation, and he asked if we could wait to pull the stats because he thought he could hit 60,000 records, but I told him we weren't going to do him any favors. So just really amazing stuff from some of our all-stars. Yeah, can't say enough great things about all of them, but of course, it's thanks to everybody that's being able to contribute data that makes the Atlas run so well. In terms of point counts, Bob Saunders still number one. I've been trying my best to catch him, but I don't know if it's physically possible to catch him in this final year. So amazing stuff. Thanks again to Bob and all of our other Atlas point count all-stars. Some pretty incredible numbers there. And lots of great highlights from this past year. We had some great coverage on northern trips up into remote places, fly-in trips. Picture there of, I think that's Mark Peck with a young caribou. We had some great square bash events across sort of central Ontario. Our Atlas crews did an amazing amount of work getting coverage completed in areas that we didn't think were going to get covered by volunteers this past year. So it's been another year of real fun surprises and great finds across the province. I mentioned our Atlas trips. We had 6-7 northern trips last year that the Atlas was able to support, covering off a number of those blocks in the far north, and we're really excited about some more trips coming up this year as well. And we wanted to take a bit of an opportunity to show some early things that we're learning about Atlas results. So these maps are completely hot off the press. I think they were produced less than a few days ago. They're still very preliminary, but these are our first looks at being able to look at the relative abundance that's being collected thanks to Atlaser point counts and Atlas checklists that are recording numbers of individuals. So I pulled up Purple Martin here. So the two maps at first glance look pretty similar. We've got Atlas 2 on the left and Atlas 3 on the right. But you can see if you kind of keep shooting your eyes back and forth, you can see there's a bit of a difference. And the really cool thing that we're going to be able to do this Atlas is not just compare what's changed in terms of the distribution, but we're going to be able to compare what's changed in terms of the relative abundance over the last 20 years. So if you take Atlas 2 and you subtract Atlas 3 using the same analytical methodology, you end up with a map that looks like this. And this shows us what's happening in terms of relative abundance. So it's Purple Martin, our early analysis. Remember, this is still very preliminary, doesn't have all the data. The model still needs to be refined, but it looks like Purple Martin has really declined in terms of relative abundance in the northwestern Ontario and then across eastern and central Ontario. But it looks like it's actually increasing along the Lake Erie kind of North Shore. So there's going to be all sorts of interesting things that come out of our Atlas analysis as we get it chugging further and further along. And we're really excited about the conservation implication that we might be able to make learning more about these things. Now, more familiar to people who have been on these summarizing and celebrating Sappy hours previously are just looking at the raw change in distribution, just looking at the square maps. And this, we can go back all the way to Atlas 1 with these kinds of maps. So looking at a species like American kestrel, from Atlas 1 to 2 to 3, the overall kind of range within the province hasn't changed a whole lot, but it looks like a lot fewer squares are being occupied by American kestrel, especially in southwestern Ontario. So it'll be interesting to see once all of our analyses are finished and we account for things like survey effort, whether these trends are borne out in those analysis. Carolina wren is doing the opposite. It looks like it's doing really well. If you compare the distribution, the square maps from Atlas 1 to 2 to 3, Atlas 1 it was really just a Carolinian thing, and Atlas 2 it started showing up along the north shore of Lake Ontario, and it's continued that sort of expansion in Atlas 3. And then common gallinule, harder to see the pattern here, but it looks like much fewer squares it's been found at in this most recent atlas, and sort of a steady drop in the number of squares from Atlas 1 to 2 to 3. So we're learning a lot with these preliminary results, but we can't wait to get all the data finalized. We've got one more year to make sure we get all our coverage gaps filled in, and then complete our data analyses. All right, I'm going to turn things back over to Kaylin for a bit.
Great. All right, so that kind of takes us to what are we focusing on for the last year? This is our final kick at the can, and we really want to focus on a lot of those gaps that we were talking about in terms of, which regions or squares or habitats are we missing information for? We want more precise locations on significant species records. Those data give those pins give us very fine scale information on where the birds are, what habitats they're using, and can be very valuable going forward. All data is valuable, but of course, precise locations are extra helpful. Special surveys, obviously people are taking those up more and more. They are optional, and so definitely want to focus on getting those 20 hours and 25 point counts first. But the special surveys do give us a different kind of set of information. Use the app, like I said earlier, more and more people are taking it up for a reason, and it's because it just keeps getting better and better. Please submit some photos to us. We're continuing our publication preparations, and part of the publication process will be including photos for the species accounts. So definitely submit your photos to the Atlas. If you have them, we're always looking for more photos. And then, we'll be continuing to develop the data analysis for the publication as well. So here's the gaps. I was just saying we are going to be focusing on filling gaps. This is kind of our gap map. The blue squares are squares that have less than 15 hours of effort during the peak period. The yellow squares have less than 15 point counts. And then the red squares have both fewer than 15 hours and fewer than 15 point counts. You can see here, I've kind of noted where our square bashes are going to be. We have a Bonachère square bash up in the Algonquin region from June 6th to 11th. We have that Silent Lake square bash from May 30th to June 4th. And then we're going to be having a Bruce Gray square bash. The date is to be determined, but probably in late May. So keep an eye out for that. And here's some gaps in the north. So all of the gray blocks here are ones that are already complete. And then as the pink shade gets darker, those blocks are getting closer to completion. So the ones that have no shading whatsoever don't have any squares complete. And the ones that are the darkest pink have 4% of the squares completed. And just as a reminder, we want 5% of those squares complete. So we're doing pretty good in the road to north here. And I think we should be able to get those blocks complete this upcoming field season. Here's the northern trips that are taking place in 2025, or that we're planning for 2025. A lot of this will kind of fill in those blocks that we have some gaps in to date, along with the ARU work that Mike was describing earlier. So I know Mike has already kind of started working on some teams for those 2025 Northern trips. And I don't know if he has any more info or if we will just TBD. Yeah, TBD. All right, check out the next newsletter for more information. All right, so there are different levels of getting involved. Most folks here probably know a lot of this, but you can atlas as little or as much as you'd like, and you can do things as take on as much or little difficulty as you'd like as well. So the least time and least difficulty is just to register and make atlasing part of your regular birding activities. A little bit more difficult, but still fairly easy and not very time consuming is to go atlasing in undersurveyed areas. So it's a little bit more difficult because you have to check the coverage map. You're not just going wherever you like. The next kind of step is to talk to your regional coordinator about doing special surveys. Special surveys take place at predefined locations. So again, you're not just atlasing wherever you like, but you're actually going to pre-designated spots and doing those special surveys. A little bit more challenging, but a lot more fun, in my opinion, is to join a Square Bash event. Mike and I love camping, with atlasers. We get to camp together. We get to go atlasing. We get to talk birds, for 5 days in a row, which is a lot of fun. But again, you do have to get yourself to Bonnechere or Silent Lake. So it's a little bit more, I guess, in the time investment, but a lot of payoff because you get to meet new people and have a lot of fun. And then even more challenging, talk to your RC about doing point counts. So point counts require a little bit higher of a bird ID skill. Or you could talk to your regional coordinator and get a Zoom unit and do digital point counts if you're not quite at the point of birding by ear yet. And then the most difficult and time consuming is to apply to take part in one of the remote northern trips. Those ones can be really challenging, a lot of bugs. It's very difficult. And I think we have everyone that we might need for northern trips for this upcoming year, Mike. Yeah, I see him nodding. So take that one off the off the table. But the other 5 are still options for this upcoming season. All right, Atlas Quick Start. Yeah, it can be as easy as registering, going birding, and recording what the bird is doing. You can easily do it in places you typically go birding. We are looking for people to go further afield, so make sure you talk to your regional coordinator or check out the coverage map, but we will accept data from anywhere, so anywhere in Ontario. And yeah, you can submit data through the app. Most people are, and I will push that you do it because there's a lot of features on the app that are not necessarily on eBird, like breeding evidence being front and center, the warnings when you're leaving the square, all of those sorts of things are inherently in the Nature Counts app and not in eBird. But if you have used eBird in the past, say from 2021 to 2024, and you want to import your eBird data, you certainly can do that. And we have we do have a tutorial on our YouTube channel for how to import that. So there are multiple ways for you to enter your data through the app, the website portal, or through eBird and then importing it. So lots of different options there.
All right, now it's the time for what everybody's probably been waiting for, our little trivia, year 4 trivia. So we've got a few questions here. Some of them, if you were paying attention, you should know the answer. Others are much harder. So the questions are going to pop up on the screen. For those of you who are on Zoom, you'll be able to select the answer. For those of you on Facebook Live, just type in the letter A, B, C, D, E kind of thing of the answer you think it is. We hope you have fun. All right, let's get going. So question 1. So we saw some of these maps earlier. Which species do these maps belong to? So this is the rotating Atlas 1, 2, 3 map. So which species is this? I'll give you another 5 seconds or so. Okay. How are we doing for answer submissions there, Kaylin?
Looks like people are still submitting.
Okay.
And like an influx, so might want to give it another
5 more seconds.
Okay, I think we're good. It slowed
We're
down.
good? Okay.
Yep.
The answer is, hang on here. There we go. Now it works. Had to find the right button. So this is common nighthawk. So one of the giveaways is on Atlas 3, take a look at that amazing area of all the detections in sort of the middle of northern Ontario. Those are ARU detections because we've got all that nocturnal effort for a bird like common nighthawk that's not easy to detect unless you happen to be out kind of at dusk. All right, next question. Another one of the maps. Which species does this one belong to? So let me know, Kaylin, how we're doing.
Someone is saying that the scrolling between the maps stops when the poll is put up. So I'm wondering if
Okay.
other people are having that issue too. And
Okay.
if so, I can stop with the polls and we can just have people put the letters into the chat. Yep,
Okay.
other people are having the same issue. Yep.
Okay. So why don't we do? Why don't we let it roll for a while, and then you can pop that up for like a few seconds, but we'll let it roll for a bit longer.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. So now it's rolling. I thought it was just on my screen that was happening, but which species is it? Okay. I think everybody's had a chance to look, so let's put up the poll for a few seconds. Oh, it's given the answer now, is it?
Yeah, it went back to like showing the like circling through. So I don't know what's going on there, but looks like everyone got Eastern Whippoorwill here.
Okay. So yeah, it was indeed Eastern Whippoorwill. Okay, with the more consistent squares kind of along the south edge of the Canadian Shield up Georgian Bay. Okay, so this one, we will let it roll for a while before, I don't know if you can control when the thing pops up.
Yeah,
You can.
definitely. I'll wait.
Okay, so here we go. Here's another one of the scrolling maps. So big change between Atlas 1 to 2 and then to 3 again. A species that looks like it's moving south. Okay, let's see it. The options. There it is.
Feel like people are fairly almost unanimous on this one. A lot of folks are choosing the same thing. So I'll go ahead and end the poll. It looks like people are slowing down here.
Okay.
And yeah, you go to the next one and I can share the results.
Okay, so the answer is Merlin. I love this. The maps on this one is just incredible. I remember I'm from the Kitchener-Waterloo area, and I remember it was such a huge deal, that nest in Kitchener just after the Atlas finished. It was like the year after the second Atlas finished. We had a Merlin nesting, and that was such a big deal. All right, question number 4. Not a map. After year 4, which species is not in the top 10? So this is the one, if you were paying attention, I showed you the 10 species that were the top 10 for most squares with breeding evidence. So this should be easy for everybody.
All right, I'll launch this right away. We won't be
Yeah.
interfering with the map this time.
Yeah. So remember, this is one of those reverse questions. So you got to actually read the question like 5 times to understand what we're actually asking you.
Okay, it looks like the folks on Facebook and on Zoom are going towards the same answer this time too.
All right. Let's see if they got it.
All right.
All right. So it was ovenbird, which is number 13. So not quite in the top 10. Getting pretty close though. Okay, question number 5. Which species is not in the top 20 for most pinned locations? So this one, you will have to use your own wits to figure this one out. We did not show you the answer.
I want to know how people are getting this one.
Okay, are we ready?
Yeah, I think, wait. Some
Still
last minute
answers coming in. Get them in. Get your answers in.
Okay, I'll end the poll now. Okay.
Okay. So the answer is golden winged warbler. So our top 20 is shown here, and golden winged warbler is not there. Okay, congrats to everybody who got that. All right, anybody get all 5 questions right?
Feel free to self-identify in either chat. You can let us
Yeah,
know in the Zoom or Facebook.
I got 5. I didn't.
I wouldn't have if I didn't know them.
Anybody?
Kevin said he got them. Marcy, Jacqueline.
All right.
So and Giz got it. Nice.
Kevin?
Wendy just laughed in the chat. I'm not sure if she got them. I don't think she got them all right.
Okay. Well, I think we've got some Atlas hats that we can get to those 3 people who got all 5 right.
Oh, Sheila Craig on Facebook got them all right as well.
Okay. I don't think I've got more hats than that, so.
I might have them here, so we should be all right.
All right. Well, congrats to everybody. I hope you had fun. We're going to have a full night of trivia at a future Sappy Hour in April. So if you like the trivia, we are going to have more of that in a future Sappy Hour. So just to wrap up, wanted to remind everybody where to find information about the Atlas. So you can go to birdsontario.org. That's the website. You can find links to all our social media, our YouTube channel there. We've got some of our socials up here on the screen. We're going to go into, I don't know, do we want to do announcements first before we do questions?
Yeah, we could do a few announcements and give people the opportunity to get their questions into the chat or into the Q&A.
Okay. Let's do that. So
Sure.
I'm going to stop sharing. Stop sharing. Okay. So a couple quick announcements. We didn't even talk about this ahead of time, but some announcements we want to make sure you're aware of. Kaylin mentioned photos. We're really actively trying to gather photos for the final publication of the Atlas. I don't know, Kaylin, if you're fast enough to find the media submission page and type it into the chat, that'd be awesome. A couple other big important announcements for people to be aware of. We've got our February Atlas challenge is on right now, and it's like a double challenge. There's 2 ways you can win binoculars this month. Normally we just have 1 pair, but we've got 2 pairs to give away. So the first pair is going to go to somebody who's newly registered to the Atlas this month and submit some data. So that could be somebody here. If you have just registered to the Atlas, or maybe you haven't even registered yet. Maybe you've got data sitting in notebooks, or you've got you've got eBird checklists from the Atlas period, 2001 to 2004, 2021 to 2024. You can import those eBird checklists to the Atlas, add some breeding evidence codes, and there you go. You're entered into the chance to win some binoculars. And then the other way to win binoculars this month is if you are an Atlaser already, you can go out and encourage some new people to join the Atlas and submit data. And we're going to pick somebody who referred somebody or got them to join the Atlas to win a pair of binoculars as well. So 2 ways to win binoculars this month. Our March challenge will be a 2-month-long challenge, which is submitting owl survey data. So you can start getting ready, planning for some owl surveys. Eastern Screech owl surveys start March 1st. So you could start entering, collecting those and entering that way. Any other announcements that we want to get out there, Kaylin?
You mentioned the trivia, but there's also our other Sappy Hour that's a couple weeks from now, which is it's the early data.
It is, early kind of data analysis, early results. Yeah, so that's in 2 weeks. And then we have another one in 2 more weeks after that, I think it is. That's going to be about identifying and finding gaps in survey effort, whether it's species gaps or coverage gaps in terms of like square coverage. So we've got a pretty good big lineup for Sappy Hours. We've got 3 more Sappy Hours between now and the end of April. So we hope to see out a bunch of those. But yeah, let's head over to questions. Anybody have questions about something you saw today or just atlasing in general? I'll switch it over to you, Jenna.
Yeah, a few questions have come in. Some things you sort of touched on in the presentation, but maybe just clarify. So the first question is, what is the status of digital point counts from 2024? Is the data already uploaded? So you just a status update on that kind of data.
Yeah, so the 2024 data have mostly been interpreted, but not all of those digital point counts have been interpreted quite yet. So they've not been brought in yet because they're not all interpreted yet. But we're making really good progress on the interpretation, and then we have things in pretty good order in terms of getting those records brought into the Atlas. And there might be people here wondering about 2023 digital point counts because those aren't in yet either. Those are now all interpreted. We had some snags last year related to some of the data. Wasn't recorded quite properly, but we've got all that sorted out now, and so we're should be very close to getting those brought into the Atlas. And once that happens, then we plan on notifying everybody who collected those data so that they can go in and check them out and see if there's anything cool.
Awesome, thank you. We also have a question, someone that's interested in the Kirtland's warblers that you mentioned earlier. Could you provide any information on that in terms of like maybe what region or what latitude those were seen at?
Yeah, so there was a couple of different spots where Kirtland's warblers were found last year. So we had them kind of in the Sudbury to Parry Sound area where we had some Kirtland's warblers in 2024. Yeah.
Amazing. Somebody asked how many pairs of binoculars have been given away so far. Do we know that offhand with the monthly challenges and things like that?
I think we've given away at least 7, I think, if not more. I think my like low ball number would be 7.
Yeah, I was going to say somewhere around 10.
Yeah.
And probably over double that if you count the Two Ed Seeing Project, which has also distributed quite a lot of pairs of binoculars.
Yeah, definitely.
And then one last question here. Have the participants selected for the 2025 Northern trips been notified already?
Not quite all of them, but most of them have been. So if you haven't heard anything yet, you might be getting an email from me in the next day or two.
I should mention, I saw one question earlier in the chat. It was right during my very first part of the presentation with the squares when I kept saying that there's a bunch over water. And so the question was, why are there squares over water? And the reason for that is because there's a bunch of very small islands in the water that would count as Ontario land. So those squares are not going to get 20 hours and 25 point counts, but they're still squares for Atlas purposes.
can't just be deployed to an island all summer, all breeding bird season to get hours.
Yeah, exactly. Um,
Okay, that was all the questions. So, yeah, thanks everybody for a great presentation. And just to remind everyone that this presentation has been recorded and it will be posted to the YouTube channel following this evening. And like Mike and Kaylin said, we look forward to the next Sappy Hour on February 25th to learn a little bit more. So I'll turn it over to the two of you for any final remarks tonight.
would you like to go ahead, Mike? No? Okay, nothing else from me. I think we've said everything there is to say in our updates. I'm excited, I guess, for this upcoming season and just thank everyone, for everything that they've done so far that have contributed. We wouldn't have anything to summarize and celebrate if it weren't for all of the Atlasers. So yeah, just thank you and looking forward to our last season.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Great. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.